Seems like everybody's just going crazy.
Yep.
Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night, baby. We're going to get live on Roku. We got a full house. This is my favorite season, October. Love it. And we got Jay McNicholas here with us tonight. We got
How's it going, Jeff?
Wham with us here tonight on Hollywood Squares.
Yeah.
And then Fred Andersson, Northern
Hello.
Lights, High Strangeness in Sweden.
Hello.
Very awesome lineup. This is the way to kick off an October lineup. And just real quick, next Friday, Mark Dizowak. I have trouble with that last name, but The Mysterious Death of Edgar Allan Poe and Life and Death of Edgar Allan Poe. Next Friday. That's going to be fun. Jay will be here for that. And then Stephen Flowers, Gothic Meditations at Midnight. The next show before the week of Halloween, the Friday before. And that's just a breakdown of a lot of occult stuff and old silent films like Nosferatu and Phantom of the Opera and all kinds of weirdness. So we're looking forward to that. And then my last show of the October season is Michael Aliosa from Dark Ink Publishing, and he wrote a biography about Kane Hodder, the dude that played Jason in Friday the 13th. And his company, the publisher, put out a book from Gunnar Hansen, the dude from Leatherface, the original Leatherface in the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So basically, we're going to talk to him about these dudes' lives and, these who play horror icons. That'll be the main Halloween liner. All the shows this month are, but that's the final firecracker. But it's going to be good. But let me plug these books real fast and we'll get started. First off, check out Dead Sky Publishing. We just had an author on from them, and Chad Lutsky about his book. And they do splatter westerns, which is Weird West. And if you check out Dead Sky Publishing, that's DEADSKY Publishing.com. They put out the greatest. I love Weird West, and it's having like a weird renaissance. They just put out an anthology called Hot Iron and Cold Blood that has Joe R. Lansdale in it. He's been on the show. Al Goingback, native horror author, he's been on the show. But it's just a book from a bunch of horror authors of Weird West. So basically, westerns would throw in some vampires, some zombies, some whatever, all kinds of craziness. But other titles for A Few Souls More by Wiley Young, splatter western, and check it out, Dead Sky Publishing. And then I got sent two other books I'm just going to mention quickly from Saga Press, Simon and Schuster. One's Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones, and he's another native author that's really good, that's having some great success. And this is like part 2 to some of his books, but Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. He also did a cool comic book recently, Earth Divers, and it's basically about these natives that somehow go back in time to assassinate Columbus. And
Wow.
I have a bunch of those issues, but I don't think I have them all. But I haven't read it yet. It looks awesome. One more book, The Handyman Method.
Terminator. It sounds good.
One more book,
Yeah.
The Handyman Method by Nick Cutter and Andrew F. Sullivan. I know this guy did a book called The Troop, which is about like a Boy Scout troop that's supposed to be really good. But The Handyman Method and Don't Fear the Reaper and Handyman Methods by Nick Cutter. But check those out. And we appreciate it. And let's get to Fred Andersson. Step right up the Hollywood Squares.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I got hyper for some. It's that second BC powder. Be careful with those things. But first off, it's great to have everybody here. And happy Halloween. And I guess, Fred, what was the catalyst of you becoming a weird UFO nut?
Oh,
What happened? We all are here pretty much. Jay saw a Bigfoot. Me and Wham seen alien stuff out the wazoo, so you're in good company.
oh yeah. Well,
I've seen UFOs too, so I'm not alone.
Oh. I'm always jealous of people who have seen Bigfoot and UFOs. I haven't seen any UFOs, actually, to be honest. I've seen a couple of ghosts, though, and got my bag ripped apart by some unknown entity once while walking over a bridge, which was quite traumatic, actually. I actually quit that job and started to work as a freelancer for television, and ended up on a paranormal show where I interviewed hundreds of people whose homes had been haunted. So you can say that that's when I realized that this is a really, really interesting subject. I mean, I've been interested in it since I was a kid, with UFO books and documentaries and everything like that. But after working with that TV show years ago, I just realized that there's so many stories out there, so many people who experience weird stuff. So I'd say that's how I really, really got into it.
What
Yeah,
was the ghost situation like? I mean, you saw one physically with your physical eyes. I've seen them too. It's something when you see something like that.
yeah.
But what was that like? What kind of ghost?
Well, what kind? It was a friendly ghost, I guess. But no, really,
Casper.
it didn't. No,
I'm always curious what they're
Yes, for the
wearing
friendly
because I want to
ghost.
know about. I hear when you die, you have to wear what you were wearing when you die forever.
yeah. Oh no.
What was it wearing? Do you remember anything like that?
Yeah,
Details?
it was
I
wearing a
think it's
hat.
whatever you want to
A
want to
hat.
wear, but that would be a good start. People, that's the last thing people saw you in.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So I don't want to die in my underwear, some early morning. I would look horrible walking around. No, seriously, that ghost was,
Well,
you
even in the
know,
Bible, when Jesus comes back, he goes up to Mary Magdalene. She doesn't recognize him. He's wearing different clothes. So
yeah, yeah,
clothes
You
make the
said it had
man.
a hat. A hat.
yeah. Can I tell you about my ghost now? It's
Yes, yes. Please do. Just
Oh, I'm
keep
sorry. Yeah.
talking. They're like this. Just keep talking.
oh, I'm I used I'm Swedish, wham, so I'm a bit shy. No, no, no,
Yeah.
no. It's
Yeah, we're obnoxious, so you
yeah.
just keep right on going.
No, I was doing an episode about a haunted little cabin out in the forest, and the family were mentioning that they had ghosts in the garden. You know, so I was standing outside. It was like 4 in the afternoon, as the sun was still up. This was during the summer, and I was standing talking with the mother and her daughter, and I could see from like 3 meters away how a black solid figure were peeking out at me from a very thin tree. It's no way you could fit a human behind it, and it was solid black. You could see a head and hat and shoulders and torso, and it kind of just, and then it went back behind the tree again. But it was extremely clear for me. It wasn't I you know I mean, I'm aware how the brain can create things and when you talk about it, but this was too real, actually. I wasn't scared or anything. It was just fascinating to see it. So that's my one and only true ghost story. It's hardly a story, actually, but it's a ghost sighting or shadow people sighting or whatever you want to call it. So to go back to your first question there, Jeffrey, I think that might have been the thing that made me dive deeper into the subject. When you finally see something and you understand what other people see, that's powerful.
Yeah.
I wish I had told this in a way scarier, moody way, but it's not. It was just that it was just a very casual situation. Standing talking in the garden with in the middle of the day, and it happened. I kind of wish it was down in the basement or an attic or something like that, but no, I'm sorry.
Oh well, in some ways, the realist experiences are kind of like that. They're sort of banal in a weird kind of way,
Hmm.
and that's what lends them to me. That's what lends a much more creepy quality. I mean, I think one of the best Bigfoot sightings that I've ever heard of, one of the best accounts I've ever heard of, was from a woman who she had been, I mean, she's an older woman now who lives down in Kentucky and takes care of her family. She's had sort of a hard life as an adult, but as a young person, she was an athlete. She lived in Colorado, and she was used to spending a lot of time outside. She would regularly run and hike, and she was on a run through Estes Park, which is in Colorado. It's one of the main large kind of parks in Colorado. It's got a number of big trails that go through it. And some of those trails are more public and some of them are less public. So, but she was familiar with this area because she'd been in it before. And she was on a 6-mile run. And she had run part of it and then had decided to walk a little bit and then was going to take a little bit of a break because it was a really nice day. And so she parked herself on the side of a stream. It was in a more isolated part of the park, on the side of the stream, and she had like a snack or something with her, and she was just sitting on the rock, and she was just looking down the stream. You know, she'd done this a million times, right? And she saw this, what she thought was a bear down the way. It didn't scare her because it was far away and it was down. She was downwind of it, so she knew that it wouldn't smell her. And so it looked like it appeared to her that its back was to her, you know. So she just thought it was a bear. So she just, you know, that was what her assumption was. She didn't think anything of it, but she was going to watch it to make sure it stayed down there. You know what I mean? So she's eating her snack and she's just sitting there. And all of a sudden, this bear stands up, and it's much taller than even a grizzly bear would have been, which they're very tall when they stand up. It stood up. It sort of turned the 3/4 way so that she could see that it did not have a muzzle. Its face was flat, and she could see that it wasn't, it wasn't built on top like a bear. And she saw that in one hand, it had what looked like a wriggling fish. And then as it stood up, it just started to walk across the creek or the river, the creek.
Yeah.
And bears don't walk like that. I mean, I've seen bears upright. They can walk a little distance, but just walking upright like that, and they can't hold something like this. You know what I mean? And it was walking like this, you know, it was swinging its arms like a bipedal thing would be. And it just walked off into the woods. And she said, said she had expected it to be a bear. What she saw, she had no frame of reference for. She hadn't heard about Bigfoot. And it completely freaked her out. I mean, it was like, she said, I can't even describe to you the feeling that I had, the feeling of suddenly having everything you thought you knew just ripped away. And she said she sat there for a long time, probably longer than she probably should have, because she didn't know what to do. She was so afraid. And so she ended up, instead of going forward, which she normally would have done because she didn't want to go in the direction that it had gone off in, she backtracked and ran back the other way, back to her car the other way on the loop, because it just freaked her out so much. And now she can tell the story better than me because she remembers all the details. But it's like, those are the kinds of things that make you go, oh, because she was not out looking for Bigfoot. She was not out she didn't even know that Bigfoot existed. She wasn't out looking for anything like that. And then when something like that happens, what do you do with that? You just have to admit that that's what you saw.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it feels like a lot of people have the same experience, like me, or you telling me here about this woman. it's very hard to or difficult to comprehend when you experience something out of the ordinary because it's so surprising. This I mentioned it before somewhere, but a couple of years ago we were out barbecuing here in the outskirts of the town I'm living in, by the edge of a field, and we had some Polish sausages and probably some beers, very 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 nice. And I never expect to see anything. It's I'm fine with
Right.
it. And suddenly we like 4 or 5 people see this bright circle of light out in the field. It's just like someone is having a giant, flashlight, but you don't see the beam. It just lifts up a circle out in the field,
Hmm.
and we see it, and we stand and look at it because it's very weird. There's no lamps or anything around it, or no airplanes or helicopters or whatever, and we look at it, and everyone has cameras. No one takes one single photo. Yeah,
Right, because
yeah, yeah,
no one thinks of it.
yeah.
No one thinks of it.
And then we goes back to barbecuing. And it's even today. I mean, I have photos from the same evening. Every, and on all photos it's cropped, so you don't see this area. It's just us, fooling around out there in the dark by the fire. But the circle of light, it's just outside the frame. But it's so weird. It's so strange. Today I would imagine that I would take a photo with it, something at least. But no, no, no. It's and
One would think. Yeah, I know. I
yeah,
know.
and especially if you're, like me or you're interested in this. Why don't you react on it? I mean, we reacted like we were studying it, but that's it. And then we forgot about it, and then we drank a few more beers, and then we went home. So it's frustrating, to be honest.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this several times on the show, but I go to a gym that is haunted, and that's where and I've only had a few kind of odd, little experiences there, but like the guy who is the owner of the gym, not of the building, but because it's the building that's haunted, um, he has had a number of experiences, so much so that he has finally put up all of these cameras in these various places around, and he has gotten stuff. He's gotten some very weird stuff, but not only visual stuff, but audio stuff. And in fact, he has the cameras hooked up to. He has a separate phone that's just for this, and he has these cameras hooked up to his phone, so his phone goes off whenever something triggers one of the and he can actually like look in real time if he wants to, and it comes in clusters, so it'll go for a while and there won't be anything, and then 3 nights running, every 2 hours his phone buzzes like all night, and various weird things are being picked up. But there was one time that, and oddly enough, it was the day that they closed everything down here for COVID. So he was cleaning. He knew that he had gotten a notice from the city, or from the village that he lives in, that they were going to be closing. So he knew that in advance, and so he was cleaning up the gym before he had to leave. And this was in broad daylight. This was like at 1 in the afternoon. And so he had just cleaned the upstairs, the what's called the yoga room. And the yoga room is like the last room on the right before you come downstairs, and you're at the lower level. And so he was right at the bottom of the stairs. So if you're at the bottom of the stairs, the doorway to the yoga room is just out of sight. It's just down the way, it's up and just to your right, but it's just out of sight, the doorway. And so he had just gotten done cleaning that room. He was downstairs doing some cleaning right at the bottom of the stairs, sweeping and stuff. And he got a notice on his phone. This is in broad daylight. He got a notice on his phone from the yoga room that he had just been in. So he looks at his phone, and in broad daylight, you can see it. I mean, I've seen the footage. You can see this dark figure look in. I mean, it's just like a shadow figure. It's like it's leaning in, and it looks in the yoga room, and the curtain of the yoga room which is already open, but it's still hanging there. It sort of flaps around, and this figure sort of looks in and leans in and then stands up and disappears.
Really?
And while he's looking at this, it's right up here. He just can't see right where that is, right?
Mhm.
It's happening like right as he's standing at the bottom of the stairs. And what was his reaction? Did he run up the stairs? No. He ran out the front door. That was
He ran
his
the other way.
reaction. He was like, yeah, he was just like
So would
seized
I.
with fright and ran
It was
out.
kind of like Fred's. It sounded like Fred when
Yeah,
you told your story. It was eerie. I felt the eeriness of it. I
Yeah,
know
he
what
just
it's like when you see those beings. It's like everything goes quiet, and you just like get in a trance with it. Even after it's gone, you stare
Yeah.
at the same place for a million years.
yeah, and this is in broad daylight, and he could not bring himself to come back for 2 hours.
Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
and because it scared him so much, because all he could think of is it's right up there, and I'm looking at it right here, and it recorded it, so we have a recording of it.
Really? Oh.
Yeah, we have a recording of it, and so I've seen it. It's very
Wow.
creepy. It's like you're just looking at the camera is kind of angled down, and you can see the doorway, and you can just see this like dark. It's like a little kind of a. It looks filmy, kind of like like it's made of smoke, kind of like not quite materialized, no features, but you can see a head and shoulders, and it's just like you can see this thing lean in and look like this and go out.
Really?
It's bizarre.
Is it,
I mean,
is it online anywhere? Has someone
we
shared it?
haven't put it online yet. I'm in the process of trying to get him to collect everything, because
Yeah.
probably in the next couple months, me and a couple of other people are going to go and sort of shack up there overnight and see if we can get anything. I'm trying to put together all of his accounts and put and write like a little because I'm going to eventually in the next year, I hope, do sort of an update on my book. And so I'm going to include this as like its own standalone chunk of the book, because I talk about it in the first book, but a lot of it has happened since that time. But the point is that he's had all these experiences there, audio experiences, physical experiences. He's experienced poltergeist stuff there. He's filmed poltergeist things there. He has seen orbs. All this stuff has happened. And you'd think that he would run up the stairs, but no, he just runs out the front door because it scared the crap out of him.
Yeah. Oh, it sounds. I also love the idea of, about a haunted gym, and yoga room. I've been working with a paranormal TV show for so many years, and the main star, which is a quite nice guy, he only wants the most horrifying places out there. Visually horrifying places. And I understand that. It's television, of course, but. But I mean, I could easily have found something more mundane, something more, but that could have been more, at least as scary, But the idea of a gym sounds very interesting to me,
Right.
especially since so many people moving around there. There's so many. I mean, is it an old house? I guess.
Well, it's the building itself. The building itself is an old building, and it was built by a guy whose family was one of the movers and shakers of that community early in the 20th century. So that building has always had it's gone through several iterations, the building itself, but the bottom part of the building has always been businesses, and the top part has always been apartments. And what we've been able to figure out, and we just got some of this information like literally a few months ago, what we've been able to figure out is that some of the hauntings are apparently connected with the son of the guy who built the building, because of course he inherited the building, but he was obsessed with all of his buildings, and he would go and hang out in them, and he actually lived in this building for an extended period of time. So some of the hauntings some of the occurrences actually occur in the apartment that he lived in the building. So that's what part of the stuff seems to be. The other stuff seems to be that's more particular just to the gym. It turns out that in late 2019, we didn't literally know this until seriously like 2 or 3 months ago. There was a guy who lived in the apartment that is right up next to that shares a wall with the gym on the north side, and he died in that apartment and was found dead. And he was like, nobody liked him. He was like one of these awful people that was a drunk and a drug addict, and nobody liked anyway. And his girlfriend found him dead in that apartment, and then after that, got together with his brother, and they lived in that apartment until she moved out. So we figure there's some pissed off guy, in there, because a lot of the more negative energy or more intense energy appears to be connected with that side of the gym. So there's obviously more than one thing going on there.
Definitely interesting. You should see if he wants to come on sometime, for sure. If he can, if he wants to.
Well, the part of the problem is that he owns a public business, and he doesn't really. He not only does he not want to give any negative publicity to the business, but he also doesn't want paranormal tourists to bother his business, and so I understand all that, and in fact, when I write about him, I use a pseudonym. He's it's okay for me to mention the village he's in, but we don't talk about what building it is.
Okay.
So
definitely fascinating for sure. I know, Fred, one thing that Lamb brought to my attention when she recommended you was the boxes section. And I wanted to get into that a little bit. Obviously, we don't want you to tell every story from your book, but we've not had many.
It's a good book. It's a happy
it's
book.
great. It's great.
It's a happy
There's
book.
so many has so much unique subject matter that's unique. A lot of stuff's just cut and dry. There's weird stuff. Great stuff. I like it. But the box situation is not something I've really been able to get in depth with someone to talk about a little bit. Actually, Michelle Desrochers on the network knew some former military guy, and she asked him recently about the box situation, and he said it was in Black Ops a lot. Not to say every box situation is Black Ops, but my situation, and I've told it a million times, but I'll just summarize, and I told it to you even in email, is with a friend at one point in my early 20s, we saw 3 small beings with hoods, kind of like skinny Jawas. You couldn't see their face or anything, but it was like they were small and slender, 3 of them, and right at their feet, in front of the middle one, was a black box. And me and the friend were like, "Do you see that? Do you see that?" And we had been partying, doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and that may have been that summer of that Marilyn Manson Antichrist Superstar Tour, 96. It was a crazy year. There's no Bob going through there too, I think. But it was a crazy year. But anyway, we both saw it, and the weird thing about it was a cat named Manson, which I'm not as much into Manson as I was back then because of like all the weird pervert stuff. But anyway, the cat jumped towards them, and they vanished into just nothing. And I've always wondered about that black box, from Phantasm, the little dwarfs, the horror movie, to the Cenobites with the box. Like, I even saw some weird stuff online. I almost said weird crap. I don't know if it's crap, but some conspiracy stuff about the black cube of Saturn cult. Like, I didn't watch it all. I didn't know if I needed to do that to my brain. But apparently artists have been putting a black cube in cities, like in just like a weird art thing. Like, there's weirdness with that cube thing. But from your experiences gathering stories, what have you accumulated your personal beliefs about the boxes? And what could you share? Maybe a story.
Well, I feel that the box symbol itself is some kind of MacGuffin. I don't know. Do you know what a MacGuffin is?
I may have heard of it, but not offhand.
Yeah, I think it was Alfred Hitchcock who said that the MacGuffin is like the central point in a movie, but it's not important really. It could be anything. It's just a MacGuffin. It's just something that's there. Then you can create the whole drama around it. And somehow I feel that the box is a MacGuffin. It's there for some purpose, which is not really important. It's everything else around it, the experience itself. Uh, I mean, I in the book I've written, I first of all I didn't mention it, I think, but yeah, I did. First of all, we had I don't know how to translate it. A little man that was roaming around in the north of Sweden at the beginning of the 70s, and he was carrying a small box in front of him. And this box would, kind of send out a bright flash of light, almost hypnotizing people. And that's something you can find in a lot of experiences when people encounter humanoids or UFOs. The box symbol, the box itself. Uh, we have an earlier experience from 1967 where two teenagers meet a small, quite aggressive creature out on a countryside road, and it's carrying a kind of a box-like weapon, aiming that at them, which scares them. This is something I've seen a lot of times. This little box, but I would say that the main box story in my book is from '69, where there's a guy named Kjell Näslund, and he works at the transmitter station, one of those stations that send out radio signals and television signals all over Sweden. And he's there. It's 6 o'clock in the evening. He's gonna start working, and he sits reading the newspaper, and suddenly he had this urge to go outside and look, what's outside the house, basically. And he sees this huge UFO. It's like 150 diameters, and it's a gigantic UFO hanging there. And from that UFO comes a dozen boxes. He described them as boxes, but they're more like fuzzy, cloudy boxes, but they still have this box shape, and they kind of floating inside his workplace to kind of inspect everything, inspect the technology. And he kind of realizes that these boxes are, they have some kind of intelligence inside. So I wonder, of course, that the experience you had, if the box is some kind of, I don't know the word really, some kind of container, some kind of container of intelligence of some sort. Something that attract these beings. I mean, the box symbol itself, the box itself is so universal. As you know, you find it everywhere. um, I'm rambling now, but because I find the box itself to be a mystery, and that's why I think maybe what the box itself is not important. It's
Time
the
travel
experience
box,
around it.
hypnosis mind control box.
Yeah,
What is it? What is it?
something that makes you, you get stuck at it. You fascinate by it. It's like a gift. When Santa leaves the gifts under the Christmas tree, it's a box, and you wonder as a kid, you wonder where is it, or yeah, exactly, a Rubik's cube or the Hellraiser cube. It's a riddle. It's something that you might never know
It's
the answer of.
creepy.
Yeah, it's creepy. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So
Right.
And definitely it's a fascinating subject of boxes. I haven't seen it mentioned anywhere else. I'm sure it is somewhere, but you definitely seem to be the box expert.
I don't know about that. I just noticed that the box is present in so many, especially humanoid encounters. And I'm so curious about the experience you had there with the three dwarf-like beings. Were they kind of just looking at it or just hanging around?
They
Did
seemed more like they were looking at us, and the box was just kind of there. They weren't
All
really
right.
like doing nothing to it. I know there's a lot of controversy about Stephen Greer, and I don't know if he's full of it or not. I mean, I don't know, but I'm sure some of it there's truth, some of it there may not be. I don't know, but I know he had those little bodies of those little aliens, which even those may have been fake. I don't know, but when I saw them, I was like, "Is that what's under those cloaks?" They could have fit. Like maybe, I mean, maybe they were real little bodies. I don't know, but that's maybe they are like little grays under there, little skinny grays. I don't know.
Well, this hooded figure seems to be something that returns over and over in this subject. I mean, you have the more chubby dwarf-like creatures in Whitley Strieber's experience, which I find very interesting. And in 1984, we had a similar thing in Sweden where a guy named Ante was attacked by a bunch of these creatures with hoods, but he described them as quite large head and hairy, what he could see under the hoods basically. And they tried to drag him away into a flying saucer, which, to be honest, looked more like a giant submarine floating there. But
Which is kind of weirder, you know.
yeah, it is. Yeah, I know.
Are they gonna eat him? That's the other
Yeah,
question.
it's just it's
Yeah,
like
submarines
it's
aren't
like
supposed to float in the air.
not generally. Yeah, right, right.
Yeah.
And
Well,
oh, go ahead.
no. I mean, I was going. Someone said here they was going to eat him, but he actually had in the long run he had a very pleasant experience from this meeting.
Oh, okay.
He said himself that this was the highlight of his life. This was the best thing that ever happened to him. He became happy, relaxed, comfortable with life. But these contacts just kept going over the years until he passed away. Basically, maybe like 10 years ago or so. He was, very happy with it. It wasn't any anxiety, even if the first encounter was basically a kidnapping, more or less. Uh,
Yeah, that's crazy. Well,
yeah.
I want to give Jay a little airtime. What do you want to ask about, Jay? We try to give everybody some equal spotlight. Is there a particular thing you want to
What
ask about?
there's a great chapter that I noticed called that you associate the owls and the UFOs, and I'm interested in that. I recently saw something about that on Ancient Aliens. I think about the owl and UFO connection. So
Mhm.
my guess it would seem that people are mistaking owls for aliens and vice versa, or is it something more profound?
Well, owls in general are considered, kind of how to put it. I'm Swedish once again, so my English language is a bit limited, but
Usually
some
they
kind of
indicate wisdom.
yeah, absolutely, but also some kind of guardians or gatekeepers, but not like like you're guarding your subject. It's more like if you meet an owl, you know that something is going on, something will happen. They're like, sorry, I can't find the word for it. It's
Like
help me.
David, like in Twin Peaks, the owls are not what they seem.
Yeah, exactly. For example, yeah, a
Yes,
great one.
I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. That's at least how I see it. However, I mean, owls is not that common in high strangeness experience in Sweden, but there is a couple. Actually, my partner was out a couple of years ago. No, oh, to be I remember this now. Remember I mentioned this circle of light out in the forest. Right before we noticed that, we had two owls flying over us out there, screeching, which is quite interesting detail. It's they're kind of an introduction to the weird. Uh, I'm glad you're mentioning the owl chapter in the book, because I think so far you're the only one who mentioned it when I've been on a podcast, and I have a little newspaper clipping here. I saw the devil. And this man, in 1980, he was out driving to his summer place in Sweden. He's a Chicago guy, so he's home visiting Sweden. And when he's out driving there, he has his son in the car sleeping, and an owl lands on the hood of the car while he's driving. Kind of looking at him from very close up. The rear window, and the owl
And they're
almost
big
have
birds.
but it almost have a human face, and it sits there and is driving in 100 kilometers per hour. I don't know what you say in the United States, but it's quite fast, and it flies away, and moments later he encounters some kind of goat man on the road, floating maybe 2 meters above the ground with horns. I don't know if Goatman is a thing in the United
like
States.
It's called a Capricorn. That's me. The goat man.
Well, I've heard about Dogman, of course, but Goatman, is that big, or is it just something?
Yeah, I've heard a lot. We've had people on about Dog Man. The Dog Man, and we've had some Goat Man. I think we had someone on that had a Goat Man book. I forget his name right now, but he's got a whole book on that. That's really good. I'd have to look it up. But the Dog Man, I mean, you got Linda Godfrey. She had a whole life about the werewolves, Bray, and all that. One sheriff town where they started getting so many werewolf stories, he started collecting them in a box. So there's something to it. It's definitely weird. I like it.
A long time ago.
Oh, go ahead.
A long time ago, I can't give you a reference to the story, but I remember clearly reading or listening to a story about someone in Sweden who, one early morning in their summer cabin, were out, peeing, doing the morning bathroom thing. And while he was peeing there by the side of a tree, he noticed that a strange being was looking at him, and it was a half man, half fox standing there, which I never heard about before. Now, to be fair, I've been trying to locate this story because, I was stupid enough to not take notes when I heard it, so I absolutely no idea where I heard it the first time. But I've been very, very fascinated by the idea that there's a fox man running around out there here.
Well, that sounds very Japanese.
Yeah, it does. Actually, I never thought about that, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because they definitely have fox people, fox spirits, that, and of course fox is their trickster. Very much like coyote would be among certain indigenous groups here in North America. So that is interesting. When you were saying that, I was suddenly telling that story. I suddenly remembered. I mean, I wrote about this. It's funny when you write about these things. Like I've written my book. It's like I forget the stories sometimes that I put in my own book, and then somebody says something and it reminds me, oh yeah, there's that story. The same guy who owns the haunted gym, the same guy, when he was a teenager, he was with a bunch of friends up on Overlook Mountain, which I mean, I live in the Mid-Hudson Valley. So I'm about 9 miles from Woodstock, that sort of legendary, town that the festival didn't actually occur at. But right behind the village of Woodstock, there's this mountain called Overlook Mountain because it's the backdrop of the whole place. And as you go up the levels of the mountain, there are different places. There are like, campgrounds and they're actually indigenous sites up there too. But anyway, he was up at one of the campgrounds, And he was with a bunch of friends. This is in high school. They had been drinking a little beer, but they weren't drunk. I mean, they were underage, so they were limited in terms of what they could get here in the States. And so he had to pee. Same thing. He had to pee. So he went off. It was like maybe 10:30 at night. He went off to pee, and he was doing his business. And all of a sudden he said, this is what he said. He said, I felt like somebody was watching me, and I thought it was one of my friends wanting to spook me. You know what I mean? So I turn around, and there was a full moon, so he could see this pretty clearly. And about maybe 50 feet from him, fully illuminated by the moonlight, was this really large creature peering around a tree looking at him. And he could see it. He said, I could see its face very clearly. It was covered with hair. It was probably, he went back and looked at the tree where it was the next day. It had to have been about 8 foot tall.
Really?
And he could see its face. He said he could see its face very clearly, including the glint of its eyes, and it was just watching him. And he said there was this moment where he said our eyes locked, and he said, I really don't know how long I stood there watching this thing watch me. It would move a little bit, shift its position, but it never took its eyes off of me. And he said, I didn't feel like it was going to attack me, but it seemed like it was curious, but it also really scared me. And the thing that kind of broke the spell was that he heard his friends calling him, because he'd been gone apparently for longer than they thought he should be. And so he kind of looked away, and when he looked back, it was gone.
Oh, really?
And he said he'll never. In fact, when he tells you it's really, when he tells you the story, if you watch him, all of the hair on his arms stands up. Just he's never quite gotten over it, And this was 30 years ago.
It's interesting how when, like, I can tell certain of my stories are the same. You get that goosebumps, like with the light beings. I felt it with the box. It's almost like you're connected to that experience forever, and that thing knows you're thinking about it. That's what it feels like. That's how it feels, and I get goosebumps just now, right now. He's talking about it all over me.
Yeah.
I mean, fascinating.
I think that's also a good gauge of how.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think goosebumps are a good gauge of whether evidence or something is real or not. Except for in M. Night Shyamalan's movie Signs, when they have the scene where the alien walks across the open fenceway, I get the same feeling. Like if I hear a Bigfoot noise, I know it's real because the hairs on my neck stand up in a certain way. I'm like, yeah, that's real. When that alien walks across her, I get that same feeling. Like it creeps you out. They did it so well that it's it's fake because it's a movie, but at the same time, it gives you that. Oh, this is like found footage of an alien walking across some guy's fence yard. It's some really good stuff right there.
He captured the effect is what he did. He captured the effect. Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting.
Exactly right.
It's really interesting, And then and then it also reminded me of a story. Remember Jeffrey Bruce Hallenbach? And this is a guy I write about him too, but he also wrote his own book. He's the guy who saw the Kinderhook creature, but he had this experience at this is further north, right off the Hudson River as well. But his family owns a piece of property that they've owned for, I don't know, 2 or 3 generations now, and his grandmother was still alive, and the house connected to the house is a big, large field, at the other end of which is like a wooded area. And he came out. He came out. In fact, the way he tells the story, he says, "I don't really know why I came out of the house that morning. Something drew me out of the house, but I came out of the house and I stood at the edge of the field." Where the field came up against the yard, and I looked across the field, and I could see at the edge of our field on our property, there appeared to be this little short man dressed in what appeared to be kind of weird dungarees, digging a hole on our property at the end of the right at the wood line where the woods started. And he said, and I watched this person, and I could not figure out who they were, and I didn't know if my grandmother had contracted somebody to do some work. So he said he went back into the house, got his grandmother out. They came out and they watched this guy for a while, and they kept calling to him, and he kept ignoring them. And so finally, they walk a little bit into the field and are really yelling at this guy. And all of a sudden, the guy stops. They could tell he's a short guy anyway. He's like maybe 4'5" or something. He stops and he turns and he looks right at them, and he has no face. He has no face.
Really?
And Bruce said that he and his grandmother were so shocked by that he said it's almost like a fugue came over us, and we just turned around and walked back in the house and sat down and didn't say anything to each other for a really long time. And then finally one of them said, "What was that?" You know what I mean? It's like, what the hell was that? And then once they kind of got over that spell, they went back out and they walked down there. The guy was gone, obviously. They walked back down there, and there was no evidence of any digging of any kind.
Mm-hmm. What kind of property do they live on?
It's a house. It's like a family estate. It's a house. It's got a barn. It's got a field in the back, and that abuts up against a forested area. So it's kind of it was like a small farm, like a small homestead at one point.
Well, it sounds a lot like the ones we have in Sweden, a farm gnome, you can say.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very much like it. I remember one story a woman told where she was like home, at her farm, and she noticed that there was something going on at the field, and she saw that there were like 3 figures out on the field, moving stuff. So she took a binocular and looking at them, and she saw that there were 3 very, very, very short beings, gathering hay or something like that. And later she saw them, cleaning up the farm, basically, putting sticks in a pile beneath a ditch or something like that. And she could study them for a while, and they're kind of unbothered that she was looking. They were noticing her presence, but they didn't really do anything. Of course, they had faces, though. That's the big difference. But it's what you're telling me. It's very, very similar to what people experience here in Sweden. We have gnomes everywhere.
Yeah, well, that's like one of my favorite, like, little people stories. I mean, we do have little people stories here, actually, in the Hudson Valley. There's a number of different accounts of people who have experienced little short dominion. In fact, there are several names, like indigenous names, for the little people here, like Pukwudjij and Wemitacanis is another name, and so the Algonquin people here certainly knew that, or certainly assumed that there were various types of little people. Various nations, I guess, is how they were referred to. So people still see them on occasion.
It's so fascinating that little people is still around. I mean, even today in Sweden, people see them and report what they've seen, and I'm endlessly fascinated by these observations, because in one way or another, I feel that they're even more interesting than people, experiencing aliens and stuff.
I do too, actually.
Yeah,
I think they are, to me, they're more interesting than aliens.
I will show you something, and this is the only way I can show it.
Sure.
And you won't even see. I hope you won't even see actually how it looks. Uh, but this is a photo I received recently, and here on the side you can't really see it. It's a bit confusing. You can see a small being with a red hat and kind of. It's hard. You can't
Oh,
see.
there I see it. There, yeah,
Yeah,
it's right.
yeah,
Yeah,
Doing it.
yeah, yeah. I can
yeah.
see it.
Do it again. Do it one more time, please.
Yeah. I will.
I enlarged it so it's just you.
Yeah. You see it here.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like Dave the gnome.
Yeah. Exactly. This is this is a pretty new
That's
photo.
cool.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm. I hope I was allowed to show that photo now.
Yeah,
It's
we
of a,
saw. Oh,
uh,
okay, I get you.
but you know, it's still happening. This is a pretty new photo. There was a guy who claimed he saw this being who kind of looked like a combination between a gray and a gnome coming out from what do you call it? A fox nest, a fox.
A burrow, a
Oh
burrow.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Foxhole.
Almost look like
yeah.
the little yard gnome statues, like the
Yeah,
little beards.
yeah, yeah. It won't. It doesn't have a beard though. What I can see, uh, but I love these kind of stories, and I'm not a nostalgic person of any kind, but I do appreciate that these kind of observation often feels, except when they don't have a face, feels very very old fashioned. You know.
Is
The,
there,
I,
yeah? I was just gonna say, is there a particular story you would like to tell that maybe you haven't told before? Something for October? We just
oh.
like hearing your stories in your accent in October. I dig it.
Well, you know, one thing
you know,
that's
well, you know, to him, we have accents. Okay.
yeah,
I'm Georgia. I'm a redneck here, supposedly, but people think I'm Gothic, but I don't know what the hell I am now.
well,
You're the chubby Nosferatu, is what
That's
you
what I
are.
say, Chubby Nosferatu. That's me.
well,
Uncle
well,
Fester. Would be good
there
there,
is
yeah.
there is a ton of stories about gnomes in Sweden, and I think the best one, the two best, you know, the most crisp, weird ones I've told so many times. They're very similar to you know, alien encounters and UFO sightings, but with gnomes instead. But one thing I find very amusing is that in many cases when people meet gnomes, the gnomes themselves seems equally surprised that the human sees them as the when the human sees, yeah, you know what I mean. They kind of stops in their tracks, look at the human, and like, what the heck, and then they run away. It's like they're surprised of being seen, and to me that's kind of, it makes it more convincing to me. I mean, they just, you know, they don't. It's not like they're not caring. It's just like they're shocked, basically.
Oh,
There's
I
one,
lost track of my dimensions.
yeah, yeah, kind of like that.
Ah,
It reminds me of like when you save a moth from the porch, or had to save a hummingbird, and you're trying to be very careful. It got caught in the screen, or a moth or something. It's like a whole reality shake up. Like what the
Yeah,
hell? You know, like a fish must feel.
yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's yeah. I think, I mean, one of my well, the ones I've told at numerous times are weird enough. We have one where a child in the 50s were experiencing how, I mean, literally a ton of gnomes are trying to get inside the house. You know, they're scratching the basement door, they're trying to get in through the well, they're surrounding the house basically. And when they're finally leaving, they're going inside a bright light in the corner of the garden, which you can see from the window, and flies away.
wow.
And you have several of these. But my favorite is like the one I hinted about. There was a guy who was out walking, you know, exploring his land. He was going to a lake with his dog, and he's walking there on a trail where, you know, he's been walking there 1,000 times, and suddenly he sees this short gray being. It's completely gray, but kind of feels knitted in in the structure of it, with a pointy hat and shoulders and everything. And the being stops on the trail and it just looks at him, and he looks at it, and the dog looks at it, and then this being just runs into the forest, and he's after it, trying to maybe not catch it, but just get a glimpse of it again. But of course it disappears. um, we have a lot of those encounters, and my dream, my wish is to one day see a gnome. I rather shoot a gnome before an alien, to be honest. One day, if one day it will happen. I don't know if it's I don't know if it's we can talk about it here, but let's say a couple of years ago, let's say hypothetically, that I might have tried some psychedelics.
Say it.
Just
You can say it. You can say it.
okay. I don't know what's okay. Yeah. So
Don't worry about it.
this was the summer. I did a lot of that because that's fun and interesting, and it changed the perspective. So I did it 3 times this summer, and each time, I'm not kidding you, I saw the same guy. The first time it was on mushrooms. I was out in a nature, forest, a nature forest. Yeah, ever heard about that? And I.
I would
Opposed
hope
to the
that it would
artificial
be.
forest, yeah.
I would hope that it would be.
I've had encounters too with that kind of thing, and also
Yeah.
completely sober. So I've had both.
Yeah, but I mean, I was walking home. It wasn't so many grams. It was maybe 1 gram or 2 gram or something like that. And I was walking home happy, walking over a small wooden bridge, and this short man, I'm not saying he was weirdly short, but he was short, and he had these bulging eyes, and big pants. He had giant pants, going up to his chest basically, and he was standing there with a fishing rod, and he was looking at me like, following me with his eyes, and which of course is weird when you're on mushrooms. Yeah, and this happened 2 times more after this. I tried one on something else and then on mushrooms, and he was once peeking out from behind some kind of electrical equipment in the center of town, and once inside a store. I'm not saying I was high as a kite or anything, but
So you saw the same dude. You saw the
I
same
saw the
dude.
same dude, and
Did he have
and-
the same pants on?
I don't remember, but I strongly remember the pants from the first time. This huge
we
pants.
call those nipple pants over here.
Yeah, but I was. That's the reason why I bought this book, Mimics.
That's interesting. Definitely.
Yeah, because I kind of had the feeling that this guy he's a real guy, he's a real human, but somehow the phenomenon, whatever it is, used him during these 3 times, somehow to connect to me, personify the mushroom experience, the psychedelic experience, and he was around, and it used him in a very, very friendly way. But I'm just speculating, of course, because I have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about when it comes to
When
this
it
kind
comes
of
to
thing.
that kind of stuff, when it comes to psychedelics and plants, we've had a lot of shamanism on from Norse to American Indian, and I mean that stuff is a telephone. That's why it's here to me.
Right.
It's
Right.
a telephone.
Yeah,
Terrence McKenna, baby. That's right.
good.
But yeah, definitely.
Well, anyway, I hope to see him again. Next time, I might even talk with him. But 3 times on something, it's a bit scary. You don't want to communicate with people really, and if he's a person, maybe I should stay away from it.
Be a spirit guide.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how do you approach that? Excuse me, sir, what's your name? I only see you when I'm tripping my face off.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I haven't seen him since.
Well, it could be one of your like your guardian spirit or guardian angel or guardian jinn, and their response would be, why are you seeing me like this? Why is this the way you're visualizing me?
Yeah.
What are the components of your mind coming together that make me manifest looking like
Yeah,
this?
yeah,
You
absolutely.
know?
Oh, yeah. I love that it's this kind of guy. It's a short guy with bulging eyes and giant pants. It's not this angel or whatever. It's something so humorous. It's a almost absurd. But that kind of fits me, I guess. I hope.
What color were the
There, yeah,
pants?
Yeah.
yeah.
What color were the pants?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't think I think they were quite dark what I remember, but in my mind maybe it's creating things here now. I
Yeah,
no,
I
I
know. Yeah, I just wondered if they were sort of like clown pants.
no, they didn't have any pattern or anything like
Okay.
that. I just remember them to going up to his chest basically. So
Okay.
which kind of my that's how I see myself as
High
an adult.
waders.
Yeah.
He was out
Yeah.
fishing.
I know when we were talking about the little people, there's experience, and I may have told this one before, I may not have, but there was this house in Georgia called Bermuda Street, and for some reason, I was having a lot of activity there from UFOs that neighbors saw in the sky to some strange beings under a light post who one looked like it had a dragon head, one looked like a blonde lady, and the other one looked like a floating like swami dude. And that was really weird. I woke my brother up and did you see that? And he said, yeah, I see it, but I don't know if he just told me that because I woke him up. But anyway, later that time I went out to the back and saw a lot of dancing silver lights in the trees that were weird. And I was under the influence, I'm sure, maybe psychedelics, probably. And I saw a little man up here that was gray, but it looked like a Buddha statue you'd see in a Chinese restaurant, like a big one, but gray and fast and kind of ethereal, and it appeared and kind of just went away. And I don't know what it was. I mean, I know my dad was a very persistent pain in the arse who was probably still to this day around. So I wonder if maybe it was me seeing him in spirit form or something, because he was a overweight man. And but I remember also at that house, I was inside, and these flashing white lights came to the window, and it was like they were in the window blinking, and it was not a person. It was almost like it was little beings with maybe some kind of headgear, and there was just a lot of stuff there. But when you think about it and remember it, it's like you go to it and you're there again. And I've have PTSD from some of this stuff. And a lot of it really is just your own fear. I know I've interviewed Travis Walton with Thomas Reed before and asked him about fear in these experiences. And he said that if you take away the fear, it'd be a walk in the park. But that's the big thing with it, I guess, is just the fear of it and letting go of it. Because it can get, I mean, I know I have PTSD from some of it because I've seen UFOs over me with witnesses many different times. And I don't know if I've ever been taken. I don't think I have, but maybe it's a possibility. I don't rule it out either. But one of the biggest weird experiences I had was in here in Florida. There's been so many. A big orange rusty ball, like really big, just floated over the street. No chains attached to it, no crane, no helicopter. It was just like a big rusty ball just floated across. I think I was walking a Siberian Husky. But that's one of those situations you're like, did they take me and I don't remember a damn thing? Like, because, I mean, it's crazy. People want me to get hypnotized. I don't. But go ahead, Fred.
How do I see a UFO? I mean, I've been working in this subject for many years now, and I've been doing a lot of research and talking with a lot of people, but I've never really experienced a true UFO, incident. Is there a way for me to actually experience, except, looking up at the sky constantly? Uh, do you have any advice?
Well, one way is to
Yeah, the
maybe
best thing
invite.
to do is
Yeah,
Go ahead,
Fred.
Jay. Go ahead, Jay.
Well, I would say first, before you do that, check your local UFO communities and see if they can give you some maps of where the concentrations of sightings are, and then go camp there. It's like if it's
We-
over city, get a hotel room, stay a weekend. If it's like a rural area, get some
there is a
camping
couple.
gear and go to those places where the sightings are the most, and then just look up.
We have a couple of window areas in Sweden, actually, hot spots like that, but they're quite, it's stuff that
Yeah,
happened in the 70s or 80s, basically. It's quite calm nowadays. But I really want to experience something like this. I really want to, I need to understand what people are seeing, basically. Maybe it's
Yeah.
stupid of me, but I really need to see it.
One thing I would recommend, and I don't want to get into this too deeply because I've already got into it a little bit, is look up that UFO of God book by Chris Bledsoe. And that's the guy they brought on Beyond Skinwalker Ranch with Colonel John Alexander and all the government spooks, and he can summon UFOs. And they're basically saying with that book and stuff that you'll have these experiences too. There is some truth to the phenomenon that's happening with that, but definitely go in with discernment because there's a lot of government spooks involved in those shows. Secret of Skinwalker Ranch and Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, in that book, like has blurbs from CIA and Colonel John Alexander. But I do believe Chris Bledsoe. I was talking to Stephanie Quick about him, and she believes, and me too, that he's actually genuine. That he just got kind of too caught up with all the government spooks, so to speak. But that UFO of God, Chris Bledsoe, under it, people are saying they're having experiences from it. But definitely go in with discernment. I know you will, but go in with discernment because I'm still trying to read it, but I've had similar experiences like that he's having. I mean, it's a weird book, but supposedly it's supposed to bring on experiences. I'm also worried about you'll get out there and have the experiences, and the government will be like, "Oh, look at him! He's got superpowers! Get him! Grab him!"
No, I don't want that. So yeah.
Or do you have any connection? I mean, do you have any connection with people in Sweden who practice any kind of pre-Christian traditional indigenous, even kind of and it can be Swedish, it can be, I know that you guys, I know that the Sami are there in Sweden. The reason I say this is because these kinds of experiences, I mean, we've touched on this a little bit in talking, but so a lot of these experiences are very connected to, in my experience, are very connected to a certain kind of relationship with nature and a certain kind of relationship with spirituality. And it's not necessarily religion as such, but and certainly a connection with being able to control certain types of altered states and being comfortable with that. Because I know Jeffrey has talked about that a little bit too. I think that's why Jeffrey is interested in shamanism. I mean, that's sort of the general catch-all term for what a lot of for the type of approach we're talking about. But I was first exposed to this way of thinking about the world and about nature and about my ancestors. For example, I have ancestors that are that are Danish and Finnish and German and what's it? Not Serbian, but Sorbian. And I was first connected to all of this through a woman many years ago whose family was, interestingly enough, Swedish and Finnish, Swedish and Sami, which I know is not necessarily always been looked kindly upon in Sweden, but her family maintained a lot of traditional practices sort of secretly. And she taught me some of that stuff. And a lot of these experiences I really believe come out of that kind of a connection. And to me, one of the examples of that is, if you're familiar with Jacques Vallée's book, you'll probably be familiar with that. I can't remember now. Witnesses to Another World, the documentary that he did, that he participated a lot in, with that that I think what Argentinian is, that what a contactee who had that incredibly traumatic experience when he was young, and was really only able to sort of sort it out and heal from that experience when he reconnected with certain ancestral spiritual practices. There's something about those practices that opens a person up in a different way, and I think in a more grounded way, to the levels of consciousness that are necessary in order to sort of bridge the kind of realities that separate us from those things. There are some people who are gifted in being able to do that, like Dorothy Izot. But most of us actually need to be taught, because I don't see a lot. Jeffrey sees a lot more than I do. I sense things in other ways. If you notice, I haven't talked about my own experiences, really. I've talked about other people's experiences. I have had some experiences, but I don't have a lot of visual experiences, because I've been raised in a very Western way of seeing the world. And so if I do see things, the things that I have seen, they scare the crap out of me. And I kind of close down around it. You know what I mean? And, the way I would look at it is that if you're interested in this stuff, but you haven't seen anything yet, that's probably because a part of you is protecting you from it. It's not that. So I would say, see if there's anybody that that is connected to any of these populations that are still kind of doing this. Go and talk to them. And ask them about their experiences, and they may be able to help you, and because I didn't start having some really profound experiences until I moved here, other than what I'd been taught by this teacher from Sweden. I didn't really start having some profound experiences until I moved here to the Hudson Valley and connected with indigenous people here. And have gone to sweats, and have gone to have and I don't lead ceremony at all. I let them lead, but there's something about that it's a different way of seeing the world that we have to learn. You know what I mean? Jeffrey has a gift. I don't have that gift. The gift of sight. I don't have that. So I have to be taught those things. I have to learn to accept that those things are part of reality, because those are parts of reality I haven't. I was brought up to believe that stuff was demonic, because that's the kind of background I had, religious background I had.
Well, my background when it comes like that is that I was raised very conservative in a very, very Christian environment, very conservative Christian environment, where everything outside this bubble were considered dangerously.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the thing is,
Satan is trying to get your soul.
Yes, basically, yeah. And the thing is that since I was a child, the things that I do love is everything outside this bubble. I that's how it is,
Right.
So I'm kind of afraid that I still, even if I kept the distance, or I'm still somehow subconsciously having a slight distance to this kind of things, because I was I don't want to use the word brainwashed, but there was something in it.
You were indoctrinated, and you
Yeah,
were. You
yeah,
were,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's like in your book, in your chapter, Aliens Attack, which I
yeah,
think is a really interesting title for what the chapter's actually about. because what the chapter's actually about is some of the interesting kind of spiritual
yeah,
components of a lot of this, including Swedenborg, who, like, I've
yeah.
read like everything Swedenborg wrote like years ago, not in English, in translation, obviously. Um, but this, I mean, what I like about this chapter is that you just sort of effortlessly weave, these different religious or spiritual connections that people make with Jacques Vallée and John Keel and Swedenborg and weird shit and channeling and but that's exactly how it all sort of gloms together. You know what I mean? I mean, that's exactly how it all goes together. It is like a David Lynch film,
Yeah.
and it's terror and beauty in equal measure.
Hmm.
So don't. That's part of the reason why I say, if since you had that kind of upbringing, like I had that kind of upbringing, but it's a matter of learning a different way of approaching, deprogramming that part of your brain.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's what I would do, is practice on that and deprogramming the part of your brain, you know because people that are in, like the indigenous folks who have taught me here, seeing these kinds of things, whether they're lights in the sky, spirit lights, or as they're referred to here, spirit ships, or the different types of beings that live in the woods, any of that, all of those beings are just accepted. Even people from other planets, all those things are just accepted as part of the terrain of life.
Hmm.
It's Westerners who think of them as aliens,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in that really negative sense. Um, so, for the Muncie here, that those are star people, and they're some of our ancestors. Our souls came from several different places. Souls came from several different places, from your ancestors, from the ground, from the stars, and each one of us is like an amalgam of these different spiritual things coming together. I mean, this sounds really complicated, but this is like basic metaphysics 101 for a Muncie
Hmm.
person.
It's
So,
interesting that I live in a country where we have grave mounds and rune stones
right. Yeah, you
and
talk about those in that chapter too, right?
yeah, they're everywhere. We have a grave mound like 30 meters from the house. I mean, they're absolutely everywhere. And it's said, though I don't have any, empirical evidence for this or something, that a lot of the sightings of UFOs and other phenomena is centered around these places. I mean, we have huge areas of Bronze Age or Iron Age or Stone Age, grave fields and such.
Hmm.
Uh, Especially, for example, out in Vallentuna, which had this huge UFO flap in 1974. Everywhere, people saw this bright light and crafts everywhere, basically. And even one guy claimed, at least, that he was abducted somehow. Um, so I've been fascinated by these kind of areas, and I'm fascinated that I'm living, in the middle of an area like that.
Hmm.
The sad thing is, of course, that we have the Sweden's biggest airport 5 kilometers away. So the only thing we see basically flying around here is airplanes and
Right.
yeah,
And noise.
and noise, yeah.
Yeah, right.
So, but there is something with this ancient locations, ancient places. I don't know how to call them. Like power spots, basically, or places of
It's like Skinwalker Ranch and all the other. There's a lot of other ranches that are having similar stuff. There's something about that. I've even heard there's some here in Florida that people know about, but the businesses don't want, like the gym, don't want to tell people. Which I don't blame them. But there's something to that. Bradshaw Ranch, I got that book. There's a good book, Merging Dimensions in Sedona, Bradshaw Ranch. I think Bigelow may have bought that one. I know there's another one that he bought and sold too, and bought, sold, and raped. But whatever he does to them. But anyway, Jay, is there something? What do you asked something from the book or whatever?
Well, I actually was going to ask more about the ghosts things because you spoke about seeing one in the daytime, which is very rare. I know there's something to it. I don't know if I've ever seen it. When I was real young, I had this bed that was a dark wood headpiece, and part of the grain of the wood turned into like the silhouette of a witch, and it walked all the way across from one side of the headboard to the other. And when it got in the middle where my face was, it kind of went, and it was a 2D figure, like a paper thing. It kind of went, like winked at me and kept on going. And I'm like, it's like 4 a.m. I don't know what time it was. But I swear I saw this, and and I saw it twice, and it just scared the bejesus out of me. My problem is though, although I think there's a lot of reality to the ghost stories, we don't have any tangible way of collecting evidence, except for a few photographs, a few blurry, usually photographs, and eyewitness testimony. With the UFOs and aliens, we've got all kinds of trace evidence, and pictures that can't, good, solid, in focus pictures. So what do you think is a good way for someone to get the evidence so that people aren't going, oh, ghosts, it's just a fairy tale, it's real? How are we going to collect the evidence in the future or now even?
That Jay is a very very difficult question. I have for me the experience itself is the most important thing. To be honest, I mean. What does the experience give you? What does it bring you? That for me is the most important thing. I'm not sure how to collect evidence, data on ghosts and spirits and such. I do not know. This is naive, of course, but I still feel that we, the human, the person itself is the most important data collector there. Even if I know that, the memory is very fragile, and you tend to see things the way you want to see it, or it's projected by your own, through your own experiences and what you bring with you to the such situation. But I still think when it, at in the end, I still feels that's the most important part. What do you feel? What do you sense? Which I know is very unscientific. I'm very aware of that, but I'm a person who enjoys people, who enjoys listening to people telling their stories. And even if a story after a while turns into an anecdote and maybe starts to change over the years, I still that's part of the journey of that story and that experience. I mean, there's stories I've told now on numerous times on podcasts where I kind of feel, I notice that how it's changing somehow. It's becoming more elaborate, or some details are disappearing and some details are added. And at the moment, I'm not even sure if that is what I was experiencing at the time, or is the way I'm describing it now, is that more like I was experiencing it? The thing is that I know this is, but I'm not a scientist. I'm not collecting data in that way. I just feel that
Yeah.
this whole journey of experience and storytelling still is the most powerful thing in
Mhm.
this whole subject. Yeah, that wasn't an answer. I'm aware of that, but I'm that's what came
Yeah,
out now.
I have to agree with you on that. Yeah, I definitely have to agree with you on that. But in the scientific community, that you and me seeing a ghost, the scientific community is going to accept it as fact or evidence. But I agree with you that being the experiencer, the memory and the data collected is probably a little bit more profound than if you just collect a photograph and then take it and go, hey, here we go, boom, case solved. Uh, but I do think, and I'm maybe this is also naive, but I do think, and I'm hopeful that in the future we'll have technology that we can collect enough data to say that there's a ghost in this room and this is the form of the ghost. This is who the ghost was in real life. I don't think we're close to that kind of technology, but I think it will be available at some point in the future.
Hmm. Hmm.
And a lot of
Well,
times you get so caught up into the encounter. It's like when I was having a lot of my encounters at first, I didn't even think about technology to try to grab it. But that was like in the early '90s. It did. There were other people who saw it with me, but it's like you're so caught up in it, and it happens so fast. It's like you're almost gonna kind of mess up the experience too. But nowadays it's gotten a lot better. If you watch that paranormal caught on camera, which a lot of that stuff is crazy on there. I saw one episode recently where something was
Yeah.
down in the basement and it came out with a weird hand and I mean it looked real, but I don't know what's real in there or not. I think some of it is, but I doubt all of it is. But they're definitely getting a lot of different
Yeah, they got
things.
some
But
fake ones on there.
yeah, I'm sure, but there's some good ones on there. But yeah, some of them I'm like, is that real? Like that's a lot of it. But the thing
Some,
is with these,
yeah, some
yeah,
of them will creep you
there's
out. Though. I mean, geez.
yeah, there's some good ones in there for sure.
but, I mean, in this day and age, with the internet and all these productions and the shows and YouTube, I mean, it feels kind of like video evidence or whatever is kind of not. It's not. It's not. You can't really put any value in it anymore because it's so much of it. I mean, you can basically prove anything by searching on YouTube. Um, I still feel that the
Yeah.
to meet and talk with someone who have experienced something is still at the moment it's still the most important, most powerful thing. To hearing you, Jay, about an experience you had, or Wham or Jeffrey, that means a way lot to me than hearing some some data collected by some fighter pilot in some leaked Pentagon video. It's like whatever. I mean, this what I'm seeing and hearing now is more powerful, uh, in my eyes and ears, at least.
I mean, if you even slapped up something that was completely real, how many people are going to still say it's fake? Too,
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
There's
there's
stuff
always
like
that
that,
one
I'm
guy.
sure. Yeah, I'm sure there's stuff that's real, and everyone probably thought it was fake, and then it just got crapped on and forgotten. It wouldn't surprise me.
A number of years ago, I was working on a TV show where we visited haunted homes, and this guy, there were a couple. They sent a video, and he was filming a lamp, a lamp in the roof, what do you say? Yeah, moving, and you could hear on the video that he was scared, and he was kind of panning the mobile phone, the video, to the kitchen, and just when you do that, you can see how the one of the cabinet door in the kitchen just you know you know flies out, basically, very very hard, and you can hear the fear in his voice. And I was looking at this when it came to our attention, and I was thinking, this is too good. This is too good for being evidence. This is too ambitious. This must be a hoax. But I really wanted to meet him anyway, because it's, I was thinking, I will notice when I meet him that he's lying, or he's just making fun of us or something like that. So I spent 3 days with this guy in his apartment, in his family's apartment. They even saw a gnome in the hallway. And after that, I was like, well, he's not lying, obviously. They didn't make these things up. But I still had this thing that, yeah, okay, we'll do a show about it, and he will probably, go to the newspapers afterwards and say that it's all a hoax. But he never did that. And that for me is the most compelling evidence I've ever seen on something paranormal in someone's home. And I was skeptical at the beginning, but after just sitting with him, after spending 3 days with this guy and his wife, I started to feel that, okay, he's not lying. He can't be lying. Call me naive, I don't know, but it felt so honest in his fear. And I still haven't heard anything that he, would have come out and said that it was a hoax or anything like that. I wish I still had this video, actually, and I wonder if I still have it somewhere. I need to check for it.
Definitely. I mean, a lot of this stuff you're not going to get rich on it anyway. I mean, only the weirdest thing. I don't want to get into this kooky Stan Romanek. That's the biggest fraud I've ever seen with this kind of stuff. Is the Stan Romanek. And at first, I interviewed him, and when I first started and stuff, and man, I don't even want to get into it, from the pedo stuff to all the crazy stuff. But one thing I wanted to mention, I interviewed the great Alan Greenfield many moons ago. I noticed he's in your book a lot. When I first started out, he was someone I interviewed. It's a very popular UFO book. What's that? UFO. I just looked at it in your book, but was he a big influence on a lot of your work?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love Alan, and especially, well, for example, The Secret Cipher of the Ufonauts is one of those books that whenever I read it, my dreams gets chaotic. It's like, I wouldn't say it's about nightmares, but something is really going on in my mind and my consciousness after reading that book. And so with what's the name of it? Saucer and Sorcerers,
Hmm.
which I think is a pretty great book when it comes to, old school ufology. And with Alan, it's a guy I appreciate a lot. I find him very, very funny. Uh, there's a poem at the beginning of the book which he wrote, and he actually wrote that as a response to a tweet I had on Twitter, just an ordinary tweet. And suddenly he had posted this, and I asked him, "Did you where is this from?" Because it sounded like something more, older, something that it didn't feel like a response to a tweet. But he said there and then, and I guess he's telling the truth, that he just answered my tweet with this poem. And I asked him, okay, can I use it as the start of my book? Because it would fit perfectly to what I've written. And he agreed to that, which was very, very kind of him. I think we have very, very similar view on the phenomenon or the ideas around it. And I also kind of like a guy, or this kind of guy who. Oh, let me back a little bit here. I like the trickster personalities of some of these old UFO guys out there on the
Hmm.
field. I truly do. I love Gray Barker or Timothy Beckley. You sometimes you're not sure what's going on. Sometimes you're not sure what's real or not. But that's what I love it. It's kind of it's a way of creating mythology, and I don't see anything wrong with that, to be honest.
No, yeah, that's part of the reason why I really like John Keel a
Yeah,
lot. I mean, he's irascible, and he he could spin a good yarn, but he also did the research. He also went out there and checked it out, and even though he criticized Gray Barker a little bit, he also saw the value in what Gray Barker was doing.
Mm-hmm,
You know, so
yeah. It's we have a quite controversial guy here in Sweden. He died a number of years ago, and I won't go into so much details about him, but he's mentioned in the book maybe 2 times or something. But he's a guy who part of him was extremely unsympathetic. I would say he was a quite disturbing guy. But the good part of him was that he was good at spinning stories.
mhm.
And I notice how many of these stories still are around today in in modern high strangeness history or ufology. You can kind of sense that okay, this guy, he had a talent for telling stories when it happened, in the 70s and the 80s, and they're still around. Uh, I got criticized by a good friend of mine who read the book. He gave it a quite okay review, actually, but he really reacted to me referring to this guy in the book. And maybe he's right about that, but I'm also making it quite clearly at the beginning that I do enjoy stories. I
Well,
think,
are you familiar with the book Angels and Aliens by Keith Thompson?
yeah, I own it, and I haven't read the whole of it, but I
Because
yeah.
he talks about the different characters, the
Mhm.
different types of people that and one of those types of people is the storyteller, is the person who sort of
Oh.
carries the myth of this of these things. I mean, there's the believer, and then there's the scientist, and then there's like the skeptic. You know what I mean? But
Mhm.
he's talking about how all of these things are kind of, and it's not just in the UFO frame. It's you see this in religion, you see this in politics. It's kind of like these are the roles that people play
Mhm.
with any kind of with any kind of set of stories that are considered consequential. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so for that reason, he regards these UFO narratives as being really important because they're important enough that there are people that are taking these roles,
Mhm.
in the
Mhm.
narrative. And so to him, that right there makes it, and whatever the objective reality about all that is, um, that's what signals that it's an important cultural and social thing.
Oh, that's very interesting. Okay, I will have to get back to that book.
Saved it.
Yeah, because I'd say that's very important. The storyteller part of it all. It's kind of. I mean, yeah, I can understand in this field in ufology, especially that storytellers in that way can be considered to be hoaxers, or you can't trust them always. But these stories also is pushing mythologies forward and backward and in other directions, and kind of brings new light to certain subjects within the field. It kind of uh, it's kind of I in many ways I feel them. I feel very inspired, when I read about Gray Barker, or read Gray Barker stuff, or the Swedish guy I mentioned. Even if there's some controversies around them, it's something I can't find the words now. Sorry, it's getting late here, and
We got
I'm,
four,
Yeah.
we got
my brain is working more and more
it's okay.
slowly. I
We
noticed.
got we got 4 minutes left. Well, one thing I want to say is, Fred, it's been amazing to kick off the Oktoberfest with you. That's a great guest. We appreciate it so much. And one thing I wanted to ask, I know we don't got too long. We got like 3 minutes. I want to get a link if you got it. But what are you doing over there for Halloween? What's going on?
I'm so boring. We live in Sweden. It's only the teenagers and young ones who celebrate Halloween here. Instead, we have All Saints Day, which is
Hmm.
I think is the last of November. I don't remember now. Where we just go out and put candles on graves, or we just walk around in cemeteries late at night, enjoying the candles, basically. So that's probably what gonna do. I'm also gonna be at a UFO field course uh, at the end of October. So I guess that kind of goes into that a little bit. So, but no classic Halloween celebration, because I mean, in my generation, we don't have it here in Sweden, which is quite sad actually, because I love it.
Trick or treaters are gone here. Now they have like junk in the trunk or something. Like go to church and get some crap out of the back of a thing. But one thing I want to say is Northern Lights, High Strangeness in Sweden. Fred Andersson. That's Andersson. And Beyond the Fray Publishing. They got a lot of interesting titles. Shannon LeGros, she's really cool. Talk to her. And Beyond the Fray, so a publisher on the up and up. Check them out. And do you got a link or something you want to give out, Fred, or anything?
Well, the book you can find everywhere where you buy books, but I love to follow cool, interesting people on social media, even if I have a short break at the moment. But you can find me on Twitter and Instagram and Blue Sky as Homo Satanis, where I often post about high strangeness and books and horror movies. So please join me there. That's the best way to connect with me, and I will connect with you, of course.
What platform was that again? Blue Sky? And I need to get on Blue Sky.
Twitter, because Twitter is what it is. Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram. That's and Homo Satanis. That's where you will find me.
Now that Elon Musk has this tweeter.
Yeah.
It's
Oh.
But we appreciate it so much. It's been great. Thank you so much. Keep us in the loop on future projects. And thanks, man. It's been great.
Thank you. It's been a
everybody,
pleasure.
Thanks, Fred.
Thank you, Fred.
Listen to United Public Radio 107.7 FM New Orleans, and me and Jay next week with Mark Dizowak, Edgar Allan Poe tribute show. Edgar Allan Poe. That's right.
The Poe Man.
The Poe Man. We're going to talk
The
about
Poe
his
Man.
life
Popo.
and his death and his mystery for sure. So thanks everybody for listening. It's been a great show, and have a great Halloween.
Go to sleep, Fred.
Good night.
Yeah.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, Fred.